Hi, I'm your podcast host, Marilyn Wilkinson, and I'm super excited to have Leah Ibrahim Sams joining me today. Leah is the founder of the NFT movement Power of Women, and among other things, she is a huge advocate for diversity and inclusion. Leah, can you say a few words about yourself, your background, and what inspires you?
Yeah. Well, wow. A trio of questions. Where to start? Yeah. Previous to sort of NFTs and pandemic, I was a set and costume designer working in theatre and opera. And obviously, pandemic hit and I lost all my work overnight. I was just trying to find a way to be creative. And I think that really was the beginning of how I found illustration and how Power of Women was born. It wasn't until much later that I got introduced to NFTs, and it was only because of my partner, my husband, changing careers to become a firefighter, and his colleagues being so obsessed with crypto and NFTs that I really got introduced to NFTs. So I guess in terms of who I am, I'm very much a newbie still in this space. I think we all consider ourselves OG. I think if we pass the 6 month mark, but in the grand scheme of things, I think we're all still navigating the space. I'm still trying to figure out who we are. But yeah, I mean, I built Power of Women just because that was what I was illustrating, and if that gave a platform to advocate for certain rights that we should have as women or as people, or we can talk about certain topics that haven't been discussed or haven't been discussed enough, I think that's just a bonus for me. So I'm still navigating my way. Power of Women is just still, I guess, in its infancy, trying to build itself to become hopefully what it will be in the future, which is something that stands up for all women and for all people looking for diversity, inclusivity, and just equity, I think.
Yeah, so it's amazing that you have this platform where you can advocate for women's rights, and I definitely want to talk to you more about that. So when you started this huge project, what were the beginnings like? I mean, did you think that it would grow as fast as it has?
Actually, no. And I had no expectations of NFTs or Power of Women at all. I was selling my illustrations on Etsy and not doing a great job at it, to be frankly honest with you. Not many people were that interested in my artwork, not as much as the community in Web3 have been. I purely said to my husband, look, here's 50 illustrations that you can use. You go for it. You think you can sell my artwork as NFTs, you go for it. And we basically researched, learned how to shill, learned that hyping for 2 weeks was pretty standard for dropping a collection. We spent 2 weeks shilling and hyping it up, and we launched it and it sold within 3 hours, 50 artworks in 3 hours. And I remember turning around, looking at the constant dings of the email notifications, and realizing that I'd made more money in about 3 hours than I did in a whole year on Etsy, which I think it has a lot more to say about my success in Etsy than it does in my NFTs. But I remember saying to Jack, well, what's an NFT again? So, it wasn't really until after the League of Extraordinary Women, we both dug down and tried to understand what NFTs were, tried to understand why this Web3 community was so different from any other community we've had before. And, I think a lot of people come in thinking that they're going to make money or, invest. But I think a lot of people stay for the community. And I think that's exactly what we've done as well. So had I, in terms of expectations, no expectations whatsoever. It wasn't until we really looked into NFTs that we thought, well, how can we grow? And every time we're always looking at the next step. We were never thinking that we were going to be an enormous platform advocating for certain topics that women found important in this space. So, this, I don't know, it's just been a bit of a whirlwind and a bit of a rabbit hole that we found ourselves in. But I'm just so glad, I was never expecting to make a career out of this, and to be able to earn a decent living from my art is just incredible.
It sounds like quite an exciting journey. And I have to say, that's one of the things I absolutely love about NFTs. On one hand, they're enabling artists to actually make a living from their work, and also the community aspect as well. So let's talk a bit about your first collection, the League of Extraordinary Women. That's the 50 illustrations that you mentioned earlier, right? So what does it mean to be an extraordinary woman? Is every woman extraordinary? Am I extraordinary?
Well, I think we all are. I think we're all extraordinary. And I think the important thing about that collection was that it was truly diverse. And that came at a time when we were seeing that women led projects were making less than 5% out of the total amount of projects in Web3 space. This was in August last year. Women were making the minorities. There wasn't a huge amount of diversity. And I think a lot of women who were entering the space didn't feel like they were represented in the art. So, I think The League of Extraordinary Women was actually a play on the film The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I thought that was such a powerful title, and I thought it was a little bit nerdy. So I thought that would be really great within the Web3 world. And I think, the power of Women Twitter handle, our branding, and also the power of the title, The League of Extraordinary Women, I think gave women a sense that they were represented and they could be seen and they could buy art that represented them. So I think that was really important at the time. If I were to release that collection now, I don't think it would be as successful, because I think at that time we really hit a niche market where women were flooding the space because they felt like they needed a seat at the table, but they couldn't feel like they could collect necessarily a lot of artwork that truly represented them. One of the most significant moments was when someone had commented on one of my artworks and said, "This looks like my daughter." And this is one of the first artworks I've seen that really truly feel like I can see my daughter in this artwork. And it was not a white woman. And, I think that was really important, that, in a world where we lack diversity on media, marketing, advertising, that we see ourselves in art, especially in Web3, where technology is the future and this is the future for our kids. So, yeah, I think in short, yes, every woman is extraordinary and we all should feel like we're capable of being extraordinary.
So I love how your art resonates with people, with women of all backgrounds and colors. And I mean, this topic of representation is really a huge thing, even in advertising, for example. I feel like things are definitely getting a lot better now, but a few years ago, if you wanted to buy a foundation and you were a Black woman, probably you would very rarely see advertising or even products available in a shade that suited you. So feeling represented and heard is really just an absolutely huge topic. And I love the work that you're doing to propel this along. Let's talk a bit more about the 50 women in the collection. So, did you meet them, or like how did you choose to feature them? Are they real women that you've met and that inspired you, or how did that come about?
No, well, the League of Extraordinary Women was just artworks that I was doing every day during lockdown. They weren't real women. And ever since the League of Extraordinary Women, the portraits that I do don't represent real people, because I think it's important that everyone is capable of looking at this artwork and feel like they are represented without, it being a representation of a real woman or an existing woman. I think in terms of our stories behind each artworks moving forward, the League of Extraordinary Women, there was not a lot of thought behind it other than let's try and sell some NFTs. Um, but moving forward, Jack and I really tried to figure out what was important in this space. After the League of Extraordinary Women, we tried a couple of Halloween auctions, a couple of bits and pieces. It wasn't as successful. And, I think the reason was because we weren't really listening to and really understanding what Web3 was. And
Mhm.
if Web3 is all about community, we then thought, well, the next collection needs to be a reflection of that community and needs to be inspired by that community. So, our subsequent collection, which I'm working on at the moment, 101 artworks of women of the metaverse, each drop of 10 is a reflection of a real story shared by the Web3 community. And that is a reflection of the beautiful connection that we have in Web3 between collector and creator.
Mhm.
And also, it provides an opportunity for women and for men who are allies, or everyone in between, to just share their story and feel like they're being heard. And to see real stories reflected in the artwork, I think gives the artwork a little bit more authenticity. And I think that has really been the success moving forward from the League of Extraordinary Women. So, yeah, the stories behind each piece now is incredibly important. League of Extraordinary Women hasn't been. I think it made the impact that it needed at the time, but I think now we always are looking forward to what's more. How can we represent our community better? How can we be more diverse? How can we be more inclusive? And how can we make people feel more seen? So that's really been the sort of foundation of Women of the Metaverse.
Yeah, community is absolutely key. So, how do you engage with your community, or how does that exactly work? It's great that you're so inspired by the community, but what does the communication look like, or how do they find you?
Well, I mean, I have my own Discord where, the core group of people can come and we chat, and it's me there moderating. Like, there is no other moderators. This is a small team of two people trying to do the jobs of about five people. And I'm there, talking to the community directly. And I think that's really important. Women of the Metaverse also offers not just people an opportunity, but me an opportunity to connect with people. So, each drop I ask 3 questions which are related to the theme. So when the first drop was all about motherhood, we thought that that was important because motherhood was not really reflected in many NFTs that we were seeing in the space. But lots of Twitter bios were all about mums who are creators, who are collectors, who are investors. And so we just did a tweet that said, calling all mothers. What does motherhood mean to you? What do we not talk about enough? And what does Web3 hold for our kids? And the response was phenomenal. And we had subsequent Twitter spaces, engaging mums. And for the first times, mums felt like they could talk about the really ugly stuff, like breastfeeding and postpartum and being judged for breastfeeding or not breastfeeding or everything in between. And I think for the first time, people felt like they could talk about women's problems in a space that was dominated by men. So I think that was really important. And ever since the motherhood drop, I've been doing exactly the same thing. The next drop was cultural identity. And I spent an entire month just trying to chat to the community about, what does diversity really mean? And how are we being inclusive? What does it feel like to enter a space that's predominantly white as a person of color, and these sort of things. And so I think the Women of the Metaverse has really been a vehicle for me to connect with my community and also for them to feel like they could talk about things that they may not feel like they could talk about or not feel like there's a platform to talk about it. So yeah, it's been a great relationship with my community.
That's fantastic. So, let's talk a bit more about the topic of female empowerment. So, what does female empowerment mean to you, and why is it important?
Well, female empowerment, I think, is really important. And I think it's slightly different in the spectrum of Web3. I think it's really important to always feel like women are represented in sort of top tiers of any career so that they feel like they can achieve it. But I think in Web3, when women were really making the minority in the space, not even 8 months ago, it was really important that they take up space and they feel like they can take up space because if Web3 is going to be the next technological revolution with art being its face, then why are women not having a seat at the table to contribute to that and feel like their voices are heard? And, a lot of people say, it's all inclusive, all their projects are inclusive because they've got a certain animal on there, but it's not representative. When we lack representation in the real world and we come into a space where we can buy art with an animal as an avatar, that is, yes, it's great. There is no discrimination, but it doesn't represent. And so, I think it's really important that as women, we feel powerful. And I hope that when they buy my artwork or they're just part of the community and part of the discussion, that they feel inspired and they feel like they're capable of achieving anything that they want to do. And I think it's a lot easier to feel like you've achieved something if you've seen someone else who is a woman achieving and doing the things that you want to do. And I think that's really important. So the first women who've entered the space and really taken up spaces are really the pioneers in the space, paving the way for other women to succeed as well. And I think that's really important. The female gaze is so important in Web3, especially with bro culture and all of that. So I think yeah, I just hope with Power of Women that women and anyone else feel like they can be powerful, they are empowered to do whatever they want to do.
Absolutely. Getting more women into Web3 is something I'm incredibly passionate about because if this is the future of tomorrow, then we want it to be the way it's being built now will be fundamental to how it looks in future. And of course, this needs to be built in a representative way. So tell me a bit more about your Women of the Metaverse collection. I believe there's a drop coming in for Pride Month, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, Women of the Metaverse, as I said, each drop is all about a different theme. And because this month is Pride, we thought it was really important that we celebrate Pride at Power of Women and show that we are inclusive of everyone. And the LGBTIQ community have been underrepresented. They are, continuously, I think, the stats are always showing that they are discriminated against and they're not having the rights that they should. And I think it's really important as Power of Women that they do feel like they're represented and they can feel powerful. And also, if it offers an opportunity for people to share their story, because I think a lot of the time we talk about NFTs, we don't talk enough about culture or diversity or representation. I think it's really important that the queer community feel like they have an opportunity to be heard and feel represented in art. And yeah, so basically, this drop is in partnership with or in collaboration with Outright as our charity partner. Outright International is one of the biggest LGBTIQ charities in the space, well, in the world. And it's been a real pleasure to work with Katie on this. With the Women of the Metaverse, each drop I've donated 5% to a sort of relevant charity. And I'm just so pleased that we're able to, through this, hopefully raise a little bit of awareness for the work that Outright International do tirelessly to advocate for the community, but also to show, just to have art and celebrate it in a Web3 way and just make sure that this space is truly diverse, because it's not just about skin color, it's also about underrepresented communities. And I think the LGBTIQ plus community is a community that needs to be advocated for.
So we've been talking about representation in Web3, both of women and of the LGBTIQ community. So why is it, do you think, that these communities are underrepresented in Web3? So you mentioned that yourself, that your partner and his colleagues, who I'm assuming here, but I guess the firefighters are mainly men, maybe. And so he and his buddies, they're all into NFTs. You, as a woman at the time, hadn't heard of them. Where does this discrepancy come from, do you think? I mean, is it difficulties around the technology? Is it lack of interest? Is it lack of opportunity? What do you think we need to do to get more women in Web3?
Well, I think it's a Web 2 problem. It's a real world problem. And I think where there have always been opportunities, the first opportunity that's been given is usually to white men. Unfortunately, that's just the truth. So I think in Web 3, hopefully that's going to change, that that if there are new opportunities out there, that there are more diverse groups and representation being there in the space at the beginning. And I think it was really important, especially when NFT sort of hit its sort of rise, certainly last year. I think it was really important that women flooded the space because we needed to be, as I said, at the seat at the table and be part of the conversation. I think, it is a Web 2 problem. It is a real world problem. Unfortunately, the world is patriarchal and women have always had to fight for space and for just the right to equal pay, the right to do loads of different things. And that is not going to change overnight and it's not going to change that quickly. But that fight is still necessary in Web 3. And I think, have we reached equality in Web 3? I don't think so. I think there is a predominant bro culture, and I think there is not, a 50-50 representation in terms of female-led projects or women who are founding projects or part of projects. I don't think there is a 50-50 split. And I still do wonder whether the men in the space are truly diverse still. Yes, I mean it's a difficult question. I think I'm going to shout as much as possible for women for as long as I can, and I've always said at the beginning, one day I hope that Power of Women becomes irrelevant, that we don't have to shout about women because we'd have reached equality. But it unfortunately we're not there, and I don't see that being anytime soon, just because I think it is the way it is, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, I will always be here advocating for women. And I think the beauty of women entering the space is that we've started talking about philanthropy, we've started talking about diversity, and we've started talking about inclusivity. And I think that wouldn't have happened had women not entered the space and taken up space and been successful in this space. So yeah, it's only a good thing that women are part of the equation and bring value to the Web3 community.
So you feel very strongly about women's rights, which is amazing because most people would say, equality and inclusion, great, but not many people are actually going out there and launching an entire NFT movement around it. Not many people are actually then using the funds from that to support real life charities which advocate for women's rights and LGBTQ rights. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, what drives you? Were there any experiences in your life which particularly kind of opened your eyes to the lack of equality that women face, or strong female role models, or anything like
Yeah,
that?
I don't think so. I think, I don't come from a family that have been advocates or anything like that. I was always, raised with the idea that we should all be equal, but unfortunately, it isn't. Um, but we're just going to do our best. I've never had the platform or the ability to really advocate for what I believe in because, I was working a minimum wage job previous to this, just trying to make my way and earn a living. But now that I'm able to access a huge platform and speak to people, and I think what happened was when I entered the Web3 space, we were talking a lot about, what it means to be a person of color, what it means to be a woman in this male dominated space. And I think speaking to so many of the community who felt like their voices weren't being heard, it just felt wrong. It felt wrong that women felt like they couldn't talk about their postpartum, that they couldn't talk about their miscarriages, that they felt like they weren't represented through art. And that just feels like such a tragedy for me. And, if I can do a little bit to change that, then yes. Am I an advocate at heart? I don't know. I mean, I think without this platform, I don't know whether I would be speaking so strongly about it. But I feel like not everyone has the opportunity to be loud and bold about it. I fortunately have the opportunity to be very, very loud about it and be very bullish on women's rights. So it's a missed opportunity otherwise to really speak up for people who feel like they haven't got the voice or don't feel like they're being heard. So I don't know whether I'm a true advocate. I'm just trying to create good art which I feel is relevant in the space. And if people feel like they are empowered by my art, I'm just so grateful. And that's just an incredible bonus for me. So yeah, I I just try my best. And I always said that if I earned a decent wage, I would always give back and have create a social impact. And this is sort of my way of giving back and, giving back to the community, but also giving back to the real world, the Web2 community as well. So yeah, I don't know whether I am an advocate. I just feel very strongly about what I believe in and just fortunately have a platform to speak very loudly about it.
Well, that's very humble because you say you don't know if you're an advocate, but I really think that you've inspired a lot of people, and what you're doing is really just incredible.
Oh, thank you so much. That that means a lot to me. Yeah, thank you.
So, for our listeners, where can we find more information about you?
Well, you can follow us on Twitter at Power of Women NFT, or you could check out our website, which is www.powerofwomen.io. All our links you can get through our website or our Twitter handle. You can access our Discord and see all of our artworks on OpenSea and Foundation. So, yeah, I think those are the two best ways to get in touch or to have a little further look.
Any last words or any last message for our listeners?
Yeah, I think if you are a creator, I think this is your time to be in NFTs. This is your time to be bullish, your time to be paid fairly. I think if you are a collector, I think this is a really exciting time to be collecting art. There was a saying that I heard recently, why buy art from dead people? They don't need the money. There are so many living artists out there who really need they really need to pay their bills, make a living, and create art that's necessary for our community, our culture, and sort of our way moving forward into Web3. So I think it's really important that we value artists in this space and pay them well and pay for their art and buy their art and appreciate them. So yeah, I guess that would be my final saying.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Just the other week, I did an interview with a guy called, his pseudonym is Web2 Boomer, and he's a very loud critic of Web3. And obviously, as the technology is still developing, it's not totally perfect yet, right? And one of my main arguments was that NFTs really empower artists, because I think artists make an incredible contribution to our society. It's great that finally they can get, the recognition and appreciation that they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the first time, we are looking at a space and a community and a group of people that really value art and pay them fairly. Artists have always been sensitive people that really look at the world and really interpret it in different ways. And I think that's really important to have in the space. And NFTs are not just for digital artists. I think because of NFTs, we are now looking at actors looking at royalties as part of their contract. It's really shifting a culture of behavior where we stop taking advantage of artists and we actually value their time and commitment to their art and to their skills. So I absolutely agree with everything that you said, and good for you for advocating for NFTs. I think there is so much misinformation out there about the community, about the technology, and just yeah, I think there are so many good aspects to what we have here, and the more the merrier.
Well, thank you, Leah. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
Oh, it was wonderful speaking to you too. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for having me.